We'll start. Good afternoon to all of you. In the last class, we have understood about the species concept. What is species? Different. Why defining a species is very difficult. And whatever the definition you give, it is not the holistic definition. And at the same time, we have tried to understand about the different concepts of the species by different schools of science or thought. So today, after understanding what is a species, at least we know now what are the characters of a species. Uh, so after having studied all those things, today let me move on to the next topic, which speaks about the speciation. Because the purpose of evolution is the speciation. In the sense, we will be able to witness an evolution provided there is a speciation. Otherwise, uh, we can say that evolution is in under process. So, uh, this speciation is the actually the last topic in any of the evolutionary biology uh, topics or subject, because the speciation is the end of what we have discussed all these days. So now the first we should know what exactly meant by speciation. Speciation refers to the formation of a distinct new species, new form in course of evolution. The entire course of evolution results in the process of speciation. So the formation of a new and distinct species is the in course of evolution. We call it as speciation, or in short, it is the formation of a new species. It is the formation of a new species. We call it as speciation. Generally, the process of speciation involves splitting a single evolutionary lineage into two or more genetically independent lineages. From one single lineage or from one common ancestor, we split. One common ancestor means it's a gene pool of the ancestor. From that gene pool of the ancestor, split that single gene pool into two or more genetically independent lineages. That is what we call the speciation. So, generally speaking, when a new species is formed, the older will perish. Older will perish. Because, in the sense, it is not fully perishing, it is actually incarnated into a new one. That is what we call the speciation. When a population usually becomes reproductively isolated, and if that isolation persists for future also, then we can say that a new species has arisen or new species has taken birth. So what should happen? Two populations should become, or two clusters of the same native population or original population should split, and both of them should become reproductively distinct, reproductively isolated from each other, and such isolation should continue for future also. Then we can say that a new species has taken birth. The this speciation event, if you see, it is not typically a product of natural selection. Every time it is not the typically the product of natural selection, in the sense natural selection is not the only force which is responsible for the speciation, but most of the time it is a geographic and biological accident, we call it. How and why the new species are formed, no, we don't know, it's accident. Some kind of geographic and biologic accident, the new species are formed. Uh, once the species are formed, then they are put into natural selection or other mechanism. Then the nature selects whether to select this and perpetuate this or to discard it there and then only. So that's why A natural selection is the later force. First, there will be speciation and new species will form, but whether that will perpetuate, continue, it is left to the goodwill of natural selection. Speciation has different steps. First step is the variation, the raw material. There must be space, um, the variation should appear. And for example, all of you know that the long-necked giraffes. First, a long-necked giraffe evolved, and then it was been put to natural selection, and then the continuation of this giraffes with long neck continued. Then this is the result of the living things struggle for existence. In that, some will survive, some individuals will survive and reproduce, whereas others will perish. Then natural selection causes the genetic change in that. And as a result of that, new species are formed and they adapt to their environment. So these are the steps which are involved in speciation. Now, at what is the rate of speciation? Actually, the species can take place, the new species can take birth either by punctuated equilibrium or through gradualism. What is the difference between this punctuated equilibrium and gradualism? What is punctuated equilibrium? It's a theory that speciation may occur during a brief period of rapid genetic change. As far as this punctuated equilibrium is concerned, for the origin of the new species, we need not wait for a very long time, but there must be rapid genetic change within the gene pool for a brief period of time, then a new species will appear. That is what we call punctuated equilibrium. Rapid, either by mutation, point mutation, or by recombination, or whatever the may be the reasons, a new species may occur during a brief period, in that short period, where rapid genetic changes are happening in the gene pool. This is one. That's the punctuated equilibrium. Another is the gradualism. Here, it says that the speciation may occur through a gradual change of adaptation, step by step, like the lengthening the neck of giraffe. It's a gradualism. By uh, lengthening the neck, slowly, by every generation, there will be minute changes, very subtle changes. And it helps gradually to adapt itself to the nature. That is what we call the gradualism. So, as far as the rate of speciation concerned, either it may be rapid, as it is mentioned in punctuated equilibrium, or it can be a slow and continuous process proposed in the gradualism. So now, I would like to introduce one more term, extinct. All of you know, it's a stage or state of the species that no longer exists. We say that Indian cheetah has become extinct. That is, no individuals, no species of that, no members of that species are seen. That they have perished forever. That we call it as extinct. So, for a species to continue to exist, what should happen is some members must have traits that allow them to survive. If any individual, if any species is surviving today or continues to exist today, means at least some member of that species have certain characters or traits that make them to alive, that helps them to alive. And when they alive, they can pass their genes on to the next generation. Then what is the extinct? There are no member in the species which which are not in a position to transfer their genes to the next generation. So as a result, they have become extinct. Now, this is the gradualism and is the how the gradualism and punctuated equilibrium differs. Gradualism, see, that's a two lineage, and here in the end there are two separate species. This is the ancestor. From the ancestor, slowly by gradual adaptation in both the lineages, they are showing the speciation. New species has been formed. But in punctuated equilibrium, it is not there. See, all of a sudden rapid, because at this level there was a very rapid genetical changes happening. As a result, with one or two steps or even without any such things, a new species can be formed. That is punctuated equilibrium, what we call. Now we will try to understand speciation mechanics. In speciation, basically there are three types. One is allopatric speciation, second one is sympatric speciation, third one is the peripatric speciation. Now let's try to understand, these are nothing but the mechanism of speciation. First let me start with allopatric speciation. Allopatric speciation is a method or a mechanism by which new species are formed. It is because of the geographic separation. Allopatric speciation is the result of geographic space separation. Suppose a population becomes separated. That is, when the population got together, they were sharing a common gene pool. But now, some individuals of that population must have migrated to a new area where no such species exists. So then this migrated population, it becomes separated from the mainstream population. Now, as a result of this, there is no more gene flow with this new biospecies on an operational level. The new species, first let's call it as new, the individuals which are colonized in a totally new area, let's call it as a biospecies. There is no more gene flow between the native mainland species and the new biospecies at the operational level. Though both of them are compatible with each other, but because of the geographic separation, the gene flow is not possible between the native population and the newly emerged population on a totally new area. Over the time, what happens? This new population evolve in its own direction. Remember, the size of the gene pool of the new population is a very small, and it contains only some share of the original gene pool. In the original gene pool must be very large. It might be very large. But the new population which has migrated from that will carry a small part of that gene pool. So as a result, the new population over the time in a new area evolve in its own direction, irrespective of what has happened in the native area. Now the question comes, when is it different enough to consider a separate morphospecies? When we can call the newly colonized new population as a separate species. So here in allopatric speciation, the new species in a new area may adapt differently to the new environment with a different set of mutations. See, the condition in the native population is different, and in the new geographic area is different. As a result, the demand of the nature in the to the original population as well as the new population differs. So the new species, in order to survive in a totally new area, should adapt differently from their main population to this new environment. For this, what is required is different set of mutations. Different set of mutations. And to give an example, the Darwin's finches in Galapagos Island, the all the birds have migrated from the mainland. But in the Galapagos Island, which is a cluster of island, each group, the finches in each bird evolved differently because of the food plants. Depending upon the type of the food plant in each of the island, the beaks of the finches were also modified or better used adapted. So this is a good example for allopatric speciation because these are a cluster of islands which are separated. Any allopatric speciation has three steps. The first step is some members of the population should isolate from the main population. First, there will be isolation of the members of a population from one another. Then there will be genetical divergence in the separated population because they cannot share the or they cannot allow the gene flow between the main and the separated. So as a result, there will be genetical divergence of the separated population. Then there will be renewal of the sympatry of the population because of the reinforcement of genetical differences which have arisen. As a result of that, there will be renewed sympatry in the newly colonized area, separated population in a newly colonized area. It should develop genetical difference and adapt to the new condition of the nature or environment. And thus, that will be drastically different from the native one, and this involves in the speciation. See, this is the Darwinian features. See, each beak is different. It is because of its adaptation to the vegetation in their respective islands. This is the common ancestor from South American mainland, Galapagos finches. But in each island, depending on the food, some have become seed eaters, some have bud eaters, some are feeding on the cactus, some are insectivores, feeds on the insect. According to their mode of diet made available in the island, corresponding adaptations have been noticed in the finches. This is what we call the sympatric speciation. The next type of speciation, what is known as allopatric speciation. In order to understand the allopatric speciation, we should know the same allopathic speciation. In order to understand this further, this is happening because of the separation. We should know the founder effect. Who are the founders? The members which have migrated to a new land and colonized, they are known as founders. The first generation, which have separated from the mainland or main population and migrated or moved somewhere else and got colonized there, they are called as founders. The separated population will have, this separated population will have only a piece of total genetical variation of the species. The mainland variations will be much more, but the separated population will have a small piece of or small share of total genetic variations of the species. So, genetical divergence in the founders are very less compared to the mainlanders. Then mutation may occur within this small population with the limited genetic variations that they have carried. To give an example, mutation of polydactyl cats that evolved in the southeastern England. In olden days, the sailors used to keep the cat in the ships because people in Europe they think cat brings good luck for them. They carried the cats to the Maine as ship cats and left it in islands, and that is the beginning of Maine Coon cat formation. As a result, a new species of cats, what is called as Maine Coon cats, in this isolated this one. See, this is how the Maine Coon cats. The number of digits are more. So this is polydactyls. The number of digits will be more than the original one. That is what has happened. These are the founders. With the genetic variation, mutation has happened. Natural selection was there, and then it selected those. That is the Maine Coon cat illustrate the founder effect. Because in the mainland there is no strong selection for polyploidy cats. But the captain of the ship, when he has to take the cat in the ship, he preferred the polydactyl cats, more digits, and left it in some island. Then what has happened? The polydactyl cats entire group and they evolved and now they are called as separate species, Maine Coon cat species. The same example I can give you oyster catcher of New Zealand birds. Babies have all white bellies. Adults are usually solid back and have a bit of white feathers mixed on their belly. New Zealand is an island. Here also the same thing has happened. Bird, when they are young, they will have white feathers, white color, solid, uh, white bellies, and in adult it will be black. Especially in the Chatham Island, Australia. Only about 250 of these birds live in this island off the coast of New Zealand. All adults have white bellies. The mainland, young ones are having the white bellies. But in case of the Chatham Islands, this oyster catcher, all adults have white bellies. Next one is the allopathic, sorry, even we have one more allopathic speciation only. Next one is sympathetic. Genetic drift also helps in allopathic speciation. Over a long period of time, the new species they will start accumulating some of the neutral changes in the genes. When there are neutral changes in the genes, no distinct effect are seen because they are neutral changes. But if you accumulate number of such neutral changes over a long period of time, what is known as genetic drift? For example, the accumulated changes in the isolated population of cypress tree in southwest. Cypress tree populations have accumulated lot of changes. How this happened? Once it was a solid forest. Because in the name of development, the forest was broken into patches because of two reasons. One is the change in the climatic condition. Climate has become drier and drier in the post-glacial period. What has instead of a continuous population, the once which was a very solid forest, now that has been broken into number of patches. Many of the cypress trees were isolated from those in the other patches. Trees are stationary. They couldn't come in contact with the other patches because each patch is geographically isolated. Not only that, each patch accumulated its own mutations also. Within that one also mutations started, and each patch with few cypress tree accumulated its own mutations. The the scientists believe that most of the new species are the result of this allopathic speciation. Literal meaning of allopathic means other country when they have moved to the other region. For this, we will consider one more example. Adaptive radiation resulting from small groups leaving the larger population and colonizing in a new environment. When a small group of individuals leave the larger population and colonizes on a newer area, they have to show adaptive radiation to the new environment. As a result, they have to modify themselves to the new conditions of life. So, a geological and climatic changes, it may be geological or it may be climatic change for the separation of the members. Even if you take the human activities that split a population to separate subgroups, maybe in India, maybe based on the caste, in some other Western countries, maybe based on the color and all those things. The there will be splitting of the population. This adaptive radiation by a small subset of the common ancestral population, small, not the entire group, it is a small fraction of the group of the population live at different times and each traveling in its own direction. Migration is a usual phenomenon from time immemorial. So when small subset of a common population gets separated by the male population. This separated group will reach a suitable habitat and establishes them. This is what we call the founder group, and they get colonized and responding to the unique environmental conditions. In the new area, the environmental conditions will be different. So uh, they get colonized in the new area, they become established responding to the unique environmental conditions of its new location. For this, for the very survival, they should show adaptation to that climate or environment. To give an example, the Hawaiian Islands provide such example of rapidly growing population. Five silverwood species. See here, one, two, three, four, five. Five of these silverwood species below are very closely related. If you study their molecular biology study, the molecular biology study says that all these five are closely related, but they look quite different from each other. They differ from most Hawaiian species are endemic and they can be found nowhere else. See, this is one, this is the another one, this is this one, fourth and fifth one, the last one. These Hawaiian islands are located something 3,500 kilometers from the nearest continent. And of course, these islands are very young. They have been created by the volcanic eruption. It might have appeared something millions of years ago. But still then they show adaptive eruptions. Another one is the dam built by beavers or humans create pond and lakes as separate population. How do we justify this? Suppose when a dam is built across the river, there is no connectivity between the fishes of the lower reaches as well as the higher reaches. Here, the studies of one particular fish, that the striped bass, which was carried out by Irwin Biotech 10 years after the completion of the large dam in southern Virginia. After the completion of the large dam, he carried out or he tried to understand the striped bosses. It has been observed that kidney morphologies of the population above and below the dam had significantly different from each other. Why? In the upper reaches of the river, after the construction of the dam, water is mostly fresh water. But in the downstream, lot of marine water or salt water influence is there. Because of that, there's a change in the population. The population of this fish below the dam is different and above the dam is different. Here mainly it was studied with the kidney. If you go back to the geological history during the Triassic period, the world was like that, like this. The early Triassic world. But by the time it enters into the Middle Triassic period, see such fragmentations have started to appear. Another good example for this is the ratite birds. Ratite means flightless birds are also the example for every evolution. After the Gondwana break, Gondwana is a large landmass. Later, that was broken into number of continents and countries. So here you can see after the Gondwana break apart, many of the species remained with Gondwana and the new area, totally new set of plants and animals developed there. After allopatric speciation, we can move on to the sympatric speciation. This sympatric speciation occurs only within the population. It doesn't require any geographic separation, but separation is made possible from the changes in any of the reproductive isolation member mechanism. In the sense, there is a reproductive isolation mechanism, and that is made possible either chromosome, structural, ecological, chemical, or behavioral. To give an example for sympatric speciation, the chromosomal wheat, two diploid wild grasses hybridized from the tetraploid wheat, two sets of paired chromosome. And in order to explain the mechanism of sympatric speciation, three examples I have given. One is the Chinese house flower, second one is Inocetus swallowtail, and ecological one is palms on Lord Howe Island. You may ask why I have taken three separate species. What would have happened if they have put to select only one species? But here we need tetraploid wheat. Two sets of paired chromosomes have entered from some other sources. See, this is the palms that has been seen with different shapes. Some palms survive better in the volcanic acidic soil, whereas others perform better in the basic calcareous soil. You take two different types of soil. One is the soil which has been formed by the outgusting of the volcanoes from the inner side, uh, inner core of the earth. So this is the calcareous soil and the volcanic soil. In the assortative meeting, early flowering is seen. But whereas in the other area, especially in the volcanic soil, the plants growing, and soil tend to flower later than the palm growing the volcanic soil. So this will take more time to grow, but whereas the volcanic soil will take less amount of time. To give you more example of sympatric speciation, most common one is the wheat. Wheat was formed by accidental duplication of chromosome. Because of some accidental doubling of the chromosomes has formed a new species. Even the some example like Chinese horse flower, house flower, Anise swallowwood. The behavior, if you think, the song of the frogs. See here, the amplitude you can make, I hope, in this graph, which are kept at the bottom of the frog. Now I wish to share a hypothetical example. A microhabitat means it has unique climatic and other factors. When this environmental pressure becomes more and more pronounced, the species to speciation adjacent habitats. Basically, palm trees were growing on the volcanic soil or calcareous soil. They go to another area which is also not part of the original ecosystem and start a new colony. For the new environmental condition, you should have what kind of paraphernalia that you choose. Even the microhabitat, you take the example of one particular maggot that is Rhagoletis pomonella. This is the parasitic relationship with the American northern tree in which they fly and lays its eggs. It was in the late 19th, 17th century. This tree was brought to North America. Over the years, scientists started working and their observation continued, both the trees as well as the newly wormed, the hawthorns. Two fruit flies flow or multiplied and intermingle with them in the same habitat. And this you can call it as interbred. This hawthorn worms from the hawthorn tree, when the apple was introduced in the America, North America, some of the hawthorn insects started infecting the apple tree, and they started laying the eggs on the apple. When this hawthorn adult lay the eggs on the apple, the offsprings which come out of the adult, they also started laying the eggs on the same kind of fruit, fruit from where they have been hatched. Don't get confused here. There is one particular insect, that is the hawthorn fly. Basically, they infect the fruits of one particular fruit, that is hawthorn fruits or hawthorn tree they are seen. When the apples were introduced to North America, these hawthorn flies started visiting this uh, apple trees also. And the adult hawthorn flies laid eggs on the apple. When these eggs hatch on the apple and developed into hawthorn flies, they also started laying the eggs on the apple only. They never went back to their original hawthorn tree. Over the time, what has happened? These two populations got genetically different. Originally from the hawthorn fly, some started living on the apple, and they evolved separately, and that population become genetically different from each other, and they continue to live on the apple and causing the apple rot disease. They never went back to this older hawthorn tree, or the flies which are on the hawthorn tree originally, again they never went back to apple. So this is now talking about the tempo and pattern of speciation. One is phyletic gradualism, gradual change from one species to another. That is what we call gradualism. Punctuated equilibrium, as I have told you, species arise quickly and stay the same over time. So this is the difference between the gradualism, this is the punctuated equilibrium. Now, how does each imply about evolution? In phyletic or gradualism, environmental change gradually on geological time scale makes the change in the population, or it is the genetic drift responsible for much of the morphological changes in the new species. But whereas in punctuated, there is also a change in the environment, but it is a very quick change, then remains stable. And there must be a gradual or geographic isolation or reproductive isolation which occurs quickly, and that is continued also. So now the question is, which pattern is right? Both are right, because different kinds of organisms show different kinds of pattern. Even now you can see there are some which show a hybrid, both punctuated as well as gradualism. That is, there will be rapid speciation followed by a gradual change over time. Even there is also one more, peripatric speciation. There is speciation in a peripheral isolate. This is due to rare dispersion or colonization effect. Here also there will be founder effect. What do you mean by that? So this is the ancestral population. It should evolve like this. But somewhere here, a small population drift away from the main, and natural selection may cause some rapid divergence in this and a new species may be formed. This is also speciation by gradualism. But in between, if a small population drifts from the main and if it is selected by the nature, then it is known as peripatric speciation. So ultimately, in summary, I may say that the speciation is a revolution. Even Mayer in 1942 proposed that small population in known habitat, small population in a known habitat will undergo a loss of genetic diversity. That's the founder effect, which is due to the drift and then subsequently will give rise to a new novel allele, and allelic combination by mutation may result in a new speciation, new species. So this is what